Yeah. All right. Hello and welcome to this week's edition of The Time and Place. Last episode without Abby. I think she's gonna come back next week. So today we're gonna be talking about biblical masculinity. What does it mean for biblical manhood, Christian men? What does it mean? Like, what is that? What's that whole thing? Because talk about toxic masculinity versus biblical masculinity, and like, should we apologize for being men, or what does it mean to be a man, and all these things. So yeah, that's what we'll be talking about tonight.
Apologize for being a man. That's such a big one right now.
Yeah.
Like toxic masculinity is how old is that concept of toxic masculinity? Like it hasn't been a buzzword for that long.
Yeah. I mean, I think it kind of floated up with all this woke craziness of sexism and feminism and toxic masculinity. It seems like there's no other kind of masculinity.
Well, that's the problem with toxic masculinity is like all the classically masculine traits are now toxic.
Yeah.
It's like, do you like to fight? Well, that's toxic. Are you aggressive? That's toxic. Are you assertive? That might be toxic.
Yeah. So you have to man-spreading. Remember
man-spreading?
Yeah. So you got to be a soy boy or your toxic masculinity.
I see that stuff, that Soylent, that I don't know what it is, bottle of liquid estrogen at the store all the time.
Oh, jeez. I thought it just meant someone who drinks soy milk or something.
No, it's this like little. It's like a meal replacement shake, but it's made of soy. Like that's the primary.
Oh.
Yeah. It sounds disgusting. I don't think I could make it through it, but
no.
It's popular in IT and all that. Any kind of computer job where you're sitting at a desk for 8 hours and you probably can't get up. Just chug that stuff.
That's a soy boy. Are you a soy boy if you have a desk job?
If you work in Silicon Valley, you're probably a soy boy.
Unless you're a firefighter or like a Navy SEAL.
Not masculine.
Yeah. Yeah. So male feminists, beta males, soy boys, Nancy boys, mamby-pambies. What other?
Softies, lighten the loafers.
Lighten the loafers. Yeah, and this has nothing to do with like being gay. I think it's a completely different thing. Right? Because this will cross. Like none of these mean gay. Like they're just a emasculine man, I guess. But that's good. That seems to be the only acceptable man is like a tamed man.
Right,
like
a non-threatening man.
A neutered man.
Neutered, yes.
Yeah.
Is there any chance that you're going to be a problem in any situation? Then we have to take care of that. Regardless of the situation, regardless how big the problem, if you're going to be a problem, we got to take care of that.
Do you have any sort of biological natural urges?
They got to go.
You're done. Out.
Open them up.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of how it starts, right? Like the idea of toxic masculinity kind of starts at youth. Like, oh, he's too loud. He's too hyper. He doesn't sit still. He doesn't listen.
Yeah.
We got to dope him up.
Yeah. It's good you say that because that was like one of the first things I wanted to bring up in Future Men by Douglas Wilson. This is one of the best books on biblical manhood, especially about raising boys and like Christianity and what does that mean? All these things. And kind of what we're talking about is like as boys, the evil, terrible, horrible phrase "boys will be boys," right?
Right.
Not true. You can't say that because it's just it shouldn't be true. So we can't say it.
Right.
Okay, whatever. But in it he says, at the beginning of his life, a boy does not know what century he was born in, and consequently exhibits to many of his politically correct and aghast elders some of the same traits exhibited by the boyhood chums of Sennacherib and Charlemagne. He doesn't know any better yet. But in our day, many of these creation-design masculine traits are drilled or drugged out of him by the time he is 10. Faith resists this ungodly process and divines sin by the scriptures and not by pietistic traditions. And in other places, he says, like a boy being a good boy doesn't mean a boy who acts like his sister.
Right.
It's like there's going to be some differences, and that's okay, and that's good. This starts with Teddy Roosevelt. Yeah, so it says, when Theodore Roosevelt was at Harvard, he taught Sunday school for a time at Christ Church until he was dismissed over an issue related to this. A boy showed up one Sunday with a black eye. He admitted he had been fighting, and on a Sunday, too. He told the future president that a bigger boy had been pinching his sister, and so he fought him. Teddy Roosevelt told him that he had done perfectly right and gave him $1. The vestrymen thought this a bit much, and so they let their exuberant Sunday school teacher go. But yeah, I mean that's a reason to fight. Like someone,
Right.
you know what I mean? So there's reasons to fight, and there's reasons not to fight, and
Right.
that's kind of that. I think fighting is, there's a reason. Like this is the cover. There's a painting by Emile or Emily. It's like Emile, but I think it's a woman. Emile or Emily. I don't know. French, but yeah, there's a reason that's the cover. Not masculine, yeah. Yeah, there's a reason that's the cover of the book, because it's true. That's just kind of in there. But it's hard because we have these like natural physical biological tendencies, and their tendencies, they're not always necessarily like, oh, all boys are going to just fight all the time and be messy and gross and loud and whatever. Like they tend to, right? Like that's a tendency, but it's not like a rule. Like, oh, unless you're those things, you're not a man. And I wouldn't say the Bible says that either, right?
No.
You have David playing a harp, and like, it's like, oh, that's not manly. But
maybe that's when we talk about toxic masculinity, maybe that's the reason for it, is like the overcompensation, the putting on of like the stereotypical manliness to appear manly, right? Like the showy manliness, the peacocking, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
So you get like bro culture, where it's just about like chugging beers and being loud and being obnoxious and that kind of thing. Like that's an appearance of masculinity, but there's no substance underneath it.
Yeah. And it's weird how the feminist response to that is, so you have these men who just sleep with any woman, pigs, just see women as objects, and just, another notch in their belt as far as their sexual conquest, whatever. And the feminist response to that is to do the exact same thing.
Right.
So women can do that too. It's like, no. That's just all bad. That's bad for a man or woman. Like you shouldn't have that sort of sexual promiscuity and immorality. Like instead of like, hey, they shouldn't be doing that. It's I'm going to do it too.
Right.
Or women can do it too because they do it. And it's like, well, aren't you saying it's bad? Why would you want to do that same thing? And I know women can do it. It's called sin. Like this isn't a gender problem or whatever. It's a sin problem. But yeah, it's like, but that's equality. It's like we're both pigs.
We're both sinning, so
we can all be sleeping around, and it's like, okay, well, whatever.
And that kind of, I mean, that, like you said, tendencies and stuff, that kind of gets, because boys will be boys is one of those no phrases. Like you're not supposed to say that anymore.
Yeah.
Because it's excusing is the problem. Like, oh, if you say that, you're basically giving him an excuse to be bad, to be violent, to be whatever. And I think there is a way that can be true, right? Like if your kid is an obnoxious snot and you're like, well, it's just what boys do. It's like, yes, that is what they do. And that's why you're supposed to make sure they don't do that anymore. Like, yeah. Curtail that.
Yeah. Humans will be humans. Like that's
right.
True.
Exactly.
Yeah. We can't pretend that's not true, but we can't just be like, okay, well, that's it. Right. We're just going to appeal to our base instincts, our base flesh instincts. Say, no, that's not the answer either. Like that's true. We need to recognize that and address it. Like boys will be boys. That's true. Okay. We need to address that. What does that mean?
What does that mean?
Yeah. And if you're using that as like, well, I'm not going to tell my kid my teenage boy to stop sleeping with 3 different girlfriends. It's like boys will be boys. It's like, no, it's not.
Well, the problem is that's
not boys will be boys.
Boys aren't supposed to stay boys. They're supposed to become men.
Yeah.
Right. Like the whole boys will be boys, but they also will be men, and you want them to be mature in that way, right? Like the whole it's kind of like a forging process almost, right? Like
Mm,
you have this raw material that has the potential to be useful, right? It's strong, it's fierce, you can do something with it, but you have to do something with it. You have to
yeah,
hammer it, you have to heat it, you have to fold it. Otherwise, it's just full of dross or it doesn't do anything. It's not any good.
yeah,
And we have a lot of that because there's one, no discipline, which I guess would be the hammering and the forging, but also the other half of that is like the circumstance that forges you, right? The hardness that
yeah,
forges you. That's not part of modern society. Like parents have spent generations trying to make their kids comfortable, trying to make them
mm,
understood and feel accepted, and not
yeah,
necessarily have to like work through things or fight through things.
yeah. Doug Wilson says the point of discipline. You talk about it's crazy. We're like following along with the book. The point of discipline with boys is to channel and direct their energy into an obedient response to the cultural mandate. It is not to squash that energy, destroying it or making it sullen. Right? Like saying form it into like
Right.
the productive, constructive thing. Not just like be quiet, don't be a boy, don't just hush. It's like we gotta work with that.
Right.
Yeah.
But I mean, culture, the creation mandate is kind of that's where it comes into worldview issues. Because like if we're going to be biblical, then we have to understand that we were made for a reason,
Hmm.
and it would follow that the characteristics we have are for that reason, to aid in that reason, right?
Yeah.
The problem is that we have everybody running society doesn't have that worldview.
Yeah.
So those characteristics aren't seen as useful because they don't see them as for anything. There's no purpose. Like your curiosity is just a problem. I need you to just pay attention and focus, as opposed to like, well, your curiosity is there because it helps you dig into things and figure out problems and solve things like that. Because you're gonna have to build society. That's what you were made to do: build society.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's weird too because I think Doug Wilson talked about it too about how like uh, women build and men destroy. So like in ancient civilizations, men would come in and conquer and just like
Right.
raise the village, like set it on fire and destroy it, and then push everyone out or capture people or whatever, and then the women would make the houses, make the home, and make it. They'd turn that raised village into like their village. They'd bring their raise gardens. They do raise children. They construct and they build up the thing. A man just comes in and like destroys it,
Conquers.
conquers, like takes the land, and
Right.
then yeah. But that's kind of that's traditionally how civilization is done. It's not necessarily like the way it should be done because there is a biblical mandate um, to well, basically how it sums up is like work and keep. I don't know like what you kind of wanted to get into as far as like should we look at how like the world looks at masculinity first and then the actual biblical view of it, or because that's kind of how we're already talking about like how
Right. Yeah.
these masculinities.
So I mean, like, yeah, let's go with that. Let's like the worldly idea of masculinity, like where it comes from, where it went wrong, why we're here, why we have no masculinity anymore.
Yeah. I mean, it is the godless worldview of like we're all just there's no difference really in anything. We're all molecules. We're all atoms. We're all raised societies of bacteria. So ultimately, there's no difference between anything. There's no distinctions, and that seems to be the message of feminism too. Is that they don't want to embrace things that make women uniquely feminine, right? Like raising children or like having children, giving birth, one of the most unique things about femininity. But that's the least, valued thing of feminists seems to be motherhood. So it is this we can do anything a man can do, but what they're saying is like it's an equality. It's a neuter. They want they want no gender. It's not
Right.
equal of genders. There's no such thing as gender, right? And that's kind of where we are with the gender fluidity and the whole transgender thing. And there is no gender. It's just you're just a piece of clay.
But
And
why did we get there? Because that wasn't always the case. Like that we've had generations upon centuries of this idea of like masculinity and femininity, and they're two
yeah,
different things and they both have their place. But modern America, modern in the past 100 years, is
yeah.
the idea that like, well, maybe we need to re-examine all of that.
I think it's boys who liked theater. or,
Are you telling me you can't be masculine and also wear a frilly shirt? Because I refute that point.
I think my best like estimation of it would be that of like how we talked about tendencies and how this is what it means to be a man in like all the sort of stereotypical things, and if
Right.
you're and then that becoming a rule rather than just like a tendency and a generalization becomes a rule. Like if you don't do this, you're not a man. And then like over time of that, and then a bunch of guys, and same with women too, like generalizations and tendencies of femininity and women, and then a girl who likes to play sports or something, and it's like, oh, you're wrong, you're bad, because like there's no nuance to it. There's kind of like these rules that became gender stereotypes and stuff, and then that was like a rule. So that if you don't fall in line with that, there's something wrong with you. And then those people feeling like pissed off are like, well, then fine, I'm a boy, or fine, I'm a girl, or
Right.
fine, whatever it is, and just not being able to think properly about that. Of just like, well, that's not. Again, it's straying from the biblical. When you stray from the biblical, all you have is the material. And so it's like Marxist leftist sort of thinking, where all this kind of stuff comes from, is materialism. It's all about the material things. Like, it's the gender stereotypes, it's the dresses, it's the trucks, it's the guns, it's the Barbie dolls, it's the, oh, this is what makes you a man or a woman, or boy or girl, and which is ironic because those are stereotypes. So that's the weirdest thing about like the whole transgender movement, is that it reinforces stereotypes, right? So
Yes.
like a man says he feels like a woman. When you're like, okay, well, what does that mean? It means I want to wear a dress.
Right.
Is that what it means to be a woman?
Because I thought that's not what it means.
Right. If you ask a woman, what does it mean to be a woman? It's like, well, I feel confident and I feel bold and I feel empowered and I feel, whatever. It's like, okay, well, men can have those feelings too.
Right.
So what does it mean uniquely? And that's another problem, is that they can't even define what a woman is. I feel like, well, what are you talking about? You don't even know what that is. You can't even define it. You want to wear a dress, but if I told a woman, oh, she feels like a woman because she wears makeup and wears a dress, that's sexist.
Right.
But if I say I feel like a woman and want to do those things, I'm applauded as a hero.
Right. You're brave.
It's reinforcing these gender stereotypes, and it's like they're talking out of both sides of the mouth. They're saying like, we want to do away with these gender stereotypes because they're cultural oppressing gender onto you. But then it's like, well, that's how I feel like a woman by wearing a dress. Like, oh yes, great, do it, wonderful. And it's like,
well, I mean,
what are you talking about? What does it mean to feel like a woman?
They've learned the tactics of what they don't like. Like they've learned the strategy of their enemy. Like, oh, okay, if they could use gender stereotypes to push their worldview, we're also going to use gender stereotypes to push our worldview.
But then they also call those gender stereotypes bad.
Right.
And it's
Except
like,
in this instance.
is a girl, I feel like a boy. Oh, why? Because I have a overly sex drive, and I like to shoot guns, and I like to. It's like, okay, are you saying that boys will be boys?
Right.
Because I fit into that. Well, what are you talking about? I thought you said that was bad. And that's toxic masculinity and all the things that they say are bad, but are exactly what they say that makes them feel like a man or woman. So it's these gender stereotypes, and I think that's where a lot of like this confusion and just chaos comes from. It's become a stereotype for men to objectify women, right? A stereotype for like the bro culture and stuff. It's just a stereotypical man. And I wouldn't say that's what it means to be a man at all, but that's what it's become. So then that's toxic. And it's true, that is toxic, but it has nothing to do with gender, but everything to do with sin, right? It's not a gender problem, the sin problem. And they're not identified because they don't believe in sin.
Right, exactly. They don't believe in sin, so it can't be that. It's got to be something programmed.
And it always is. That's why people could tear down Confederate statues, because they can't fight the sin of racism, because they don't believe in sin. They don't believe in evil. So take down the flag, take down the statue, take down the materialistic thing. We have to attack symbols and things because that's all there is. There is no sin, there is no evil, but the statue is making people feel bad, so we take it down. So it's feelings and materialism. There's no soul. There's no non-material things, immaterial things at all. So just attack the material thing, and that's what it comes down to.
Because you can't deal with the real problem because you don't have a category for the real problem.
I've already said there's no sin. It's
Right.
postmodern. You make your own right and wrong. We do as things, whatever. So it's like, okay, well then what? How do we end racism? It's like, well, just destroy all the things.
Which is the whole postmodern thing is so strange because it's the idea. The phrase that kills me is wrong side of history or right side of history. It's like that means that the thing was not wrong. We just decided that we don't like it at this point in time. At one point in time, it was right. Yeah. That's what that has to imply, which is just bizarre.
So all reformers are evil.
Right. Until they win. Then they're correct.
Yeah. The abolitionists were wrong.
Right.
Until it became a majority view or something. And then slavery became wrong.
It's such a bizarre, and they don't see that, but that's the only way that works, that idea of rights and wrong side of history.
They're appealing to absolutes when they say right side of history, whatever. It's like, and then at the same time saying, oh, there's no absolutes. It's just what we create. We make our own meaning and stuff. And it's like, I think they had rights. I think that was meaningful. I think it was true that slavery was wrong always. It did become true.
Well, we're talking philosophically, and philosophy is kind of a traditionally masculine thing too, right? Like,
yeah,
I think it's strange that we have some gender stereotypes like, well, men like to do stupid things and drink beer and shoot guns and be loud and whatnot, because traditionally to be masculine was also to be a great thinker, right? And to have discernment and wisdom in some sense. Like the elder was the man that you would look to for advice or some kind of guidance in things.
Yeah.
Like the idea of the warrior poet or like the warrior philosopher. My favorite is
Marcus Aurelius.
Yes. Well, my my fictional favorite, I should say, is Katsumoto in The Last Samurai.
Okay.
Katsumoto is the leader of his own village. He's the samurai general. He's fighting a revolution, and the entire movie
is a true story.
Well, I mean, historical context, it's true, and Katsumoto is based on a true person, but the story isn't true.
Okay.
But in the whole movie, he's working on a poem. Like that's one of the big things he's trying to do. He's like, he's trying to write a haiku while also being like the noble warrior of his civilization.
Yeah.
Which is awesome. And like you said, Marcus Aurelius, like a great fighter who was also a great thinker.
Yeah.
Right. Like that's not, and one of the theories I heard also is Plato. Apparently his name, it can mean large or broad. And the idea is that he was a large man because he was a wrestler when he was younger. He was a fighter, but then he later became a great thinker and a great, or Teddy Roosevelt, like we were talking about earlier. Teddy Roosevelt was a statesman who was also a fighter. He was a soldier. He was a boxer. He did judo. He had a black belt.
He wanted to be. Right? Didn't he buy a bunch of a musket and a sword and stuff, and then hire someone to take pictures with it and I'm a man.
No, he led in the Spanish-American War. He led a battalion. He was legit.
Wasn't he we need to fight. We need to fight.
He was a little bit quick on the trigger later in life. A warmonger. But okay, that's the right.
Because he had to prove I have to prove that guy. I forget his name. That Hispanic billionaire guy. He was on Joe Rogan one time, and he was talking. He's he's crazy. He's my biggest regrets in life is I didn't see combat, and right before my mother died, I told her she was fine before she died of some sickness. Those are my two biggest regrets in life because he was in Vietnam and he didn't see action. He's I never saw action, so I never felt fulfilled and stuff. And then he became a mercenary, an actual mercenary in foreign countries to go on missions and stuff. And because he wanted to see action, he just wanted to fight. And he ended up stabbing a bear to death because. But he had to pay for this crazy safari experience to go hunt with a knife, and he killed a bear with a pistol. He had a pistol and a knife, and he had to go, and that was his bloodlust. But because he just felt I have to see it because I never saw action in Vietnam, and so it's oh my gosh, this guy's nuts. But
so, I mean,
that's toxic masculinity.
That's the question. What's the problem there? Because the instinct to fight is not necessarily bad, right?
It's the need to fight. I need to punch somebody in the face and get a fight. So that's the kind of guys that go to bars and look for a fight. They're I'm going to get into a fight tonight.
Right.
Just to get in a fight. So I'm going to push somebody. Or going to do something, and we're going to fight.
How do you get to that point? What gets you to that point?
No outlet, no good outlet for true masculinity, I guess, or just a bad example of your dad got drunk and fought all the time. So you think oh, he's a manly man, so that's what I'm going to do or whatever. And usually those guys hate their fathers too, ironically.
They jump right into it.
And end up just like them.
We all turn into our father at some point. Like
Well,
that's
because
just
we're Hitchens, we have to kill our father.
we have to kill our father.
Yeah,
I
to
mean,
replace them.
so the outlet is an important thing because masculine outlets kind of throughout history that was a thing. Like you had to be a farmer because that society depended
Yeah,
on you, or
yeah,
you had to
right.
be a soldier because society depended on you to fight. At
That's
some
what
point, we're
changed
gonna have
it.
to call on you, right?
Yeah, that's what changed it. The sedentary lifestyle of like
Yes,
we don't have to hunt and gather anymore.
right.
So you can be a soy boy, work on computers.
You can watch Rocky and get hype when he's training, and then you feel like it too.
Yeah, yeah,
And
that's true. It's crazy.
I mean,
But
what do we?
industrial revolution is
Yes,
bad
it
for
made life easier
masculinity.
and an easy life. It was Tim Kennedy said, "Hard times make hard men make soft times make soft men."
Yeah,
Like we made life easier, and now we're softer because of it.
and now we run Spartan races and do
Right? To
jujitsu
feel
and try
like
and find that like pay $1 million to go fight a bear with a knife and like because we had everything.
it's the dentist in
Well, there was
Africa
always
with
a war, right? There was always someone
right,
trying to raid your village, or you had
right.
to like hunt for your food, sometimes with bow and arrows or whatever. And yeah, it also says the need to defend, because there was always a threat.
Right.
There was a threats, whether by nature or by other people. There was a threat of like I have to know how to fight because it wasn't an option. It wasn't
Mhm.
like you didn't have to go to a bar looking for a fight. That fight was constantly coming to you until I would say things got better, but yeah, we do kind of lose something with that, without that need to go at it all the time and stuff.
And I mean, we had outlets to some extent through sports.
Yeah,
Like
sports. Yeah,
sports is mock combat. That's what sports
yeah,
is. You have two teams that are two armies, and we fight each other. You
competition.
know, right? It's competition. It's a way to get out that energy, to learn teamwork, to find leadership, to work on aggression, all that stuff. But even that's kind of dying now.
Now, yeah, it's not even going a year without sports right
Oh,
now.
I mean, in that sports like basketball is an example. Like basketball it's not a contact sport per se. Like it's not football. You're not trying to kill each other,
Yeah,
but it's become real soft.
yeah,
Like it's the contact is so minimal
yeah.
that it's just like run and shoot, run and shoot, run and shoot. It's almost like a display of like, look how athletic I am, as opposed to like
Well,
shooting.
sports.
Well, yeah, but I mean,
I know what you mean. Like there isn't that like kind of let's settle it on the field.
right? Yeah,
We're gonna have the referee settle it for us. We're going to have the referee call fouls. That's
exactly.
yeah. The baseball like kind of thing too is like it's a good way of like policing itself. And then that is basketball is a good example because yeah, like it seems like did you see that The Last Dance with the
No, I haven't watched that.
Chicago Bulls? It's pretty cool. It's really good. Michael Jordan, he has that competitive, I would say, masculine spirit, but he's derided for it though. It's like, oh, he's bad. He shouldn't be that competitive. He shouldn't be that. And he's just like, I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. I just want to win. Like, like whatever. Like, call me whatever name you want. Like that's just I don't know what to do with that. Like that's just me. And so, but yeah, they got into fights and stuff on with the Pistons and stuff. There's a lot of bad blood and elbows thrown, and it was kind of just settled there. But when that's not there, so Zaza with like the Golden State Warriors, Zaza DeBoer, whatever his name is, or Zaza, I forget his name. You know what I'm talking about? So the Golden State Warriors, he's a dirty player. Like Popovich came out and said like he's a dirty player, cheap shots, all these things, and there's like all these highlight reels of him just pulling cheap shots. That wouldn't have happened in the 90s,
right?
Because he takes an elbow to the face on the next play, and that's it. And he never does it again. You know what I mean? Because but now it's like, what? I get suspended. Oh, I get whatever. It's like that's terrible. Like there has to be that kind of policing of that. Same with like baseball with being in players. It's like a code. It's like a code that they policed itself. Well, now it's like we got umpires and we got cameras and everything is policed by someone else. So yeah, and that's seen as like bad to kind of to do that kind of thing. But I think there's something to it though.
Because there's the idea of self-policing is a really good idea in theory, right? Like we'll take care of it. If somebody steps out of line, we'll handle the problem. We're a unit of society. But then you have stuff where it goes too far, right? So there is. I understand an argument for like, well, we can't let that happen.
Yeah,
like we can't have hazing because somebody takes it too far.
Yeah, that's
There's
true.
always the one guy that takes it too far, and now somebody's dead, and now what are we gonna do? And now we got to scrap it all.
I mean, yeah, like what's the answer though? Like it's not honestly like hazing and like fraternities and stuff. I think there's like seriously a uh homoerotic underlying.
You're not the first person to say that.
That's the
I mean, Project Mayhem, right? Like,
yeah. Are you talking about like Fight Club?
yeah, like I mean,
Yeah.
Chuck Palahniuk is
Chuck
like
Palahniuk is
gay
gay.
man. Yeah.
Yeah, like Fight Club is gay. Like Fight Club's the gayest movie ever.
I mean, they're rolling around on the floor shirtless.
Yeah.
And that scene where Edward Norton is just beating up Jared Leto.
Yeah, because he's jealous.
Why'd you do that?
Lover.
Jealous, right?
Yeah.
I wanted to destroy something beautiful. Like,
Yeah.
oh, okay. It's getting real weird.
Totally gay. But it's so funny, like that's a huge thing of bro culture.
Right.
Of like, yeah, Fight Club, man. Yeah.
But it's like, it's not gay, dude. We're fighting.
So until you're making out. Yeah.
But I mean, that's almost like you know, we were talking about how if we look at the older ideas of like statesmen and philosophers and poets,
Let's be clear, Shannon. I don't hate Fight Club. I love Fight Club. Like I don't know what it says about me, but like that's a good, you know.
He made some valid points in the movie, like the idea of a feminized society.
Yeah.
And you have like the whole idea that
nihilism and the.
Well, yeah. I mean, how would his whole character is like, you know, talks about going through these catalogs to order stuff he doesn't care about.
Yeah.
The idea of being abandoned by fathers and raised by mothers, and you have this pent up aggression that you have to get out somehow. And I mean, it's another. They lash out at the system also, right? The system is the problem.
Yeah. And I would say that goes into the homosexuality thing of a misdirected affection for like fatherless men and like never having that. And there's a lot of psychological aspects to that. The things you own end up owning you, kind of thing. Again, materialism. It all comes down to the materialism. Fight Club, rich boy. What? Talk about the same Fight Club.
I mean, I guess if you consider, I don't know, man. I think Fight Club is like a lot of secular philosophy, is that it can identify a lot of the symptoms, but it can't get at the root problem.
Yeah. Well, right? Again, the root problem is the stuff.
Right.
It's destroy the stuff. Destroy the Starbucks. Destroy the cars. They go bashing the headlights of the cars, of the nice cars and stuff. And
yes. So I want to talk about this because he's saying blaming others for your problems, and you know, to an extent, that is a decidedly unmasculine thing, is to unload your responsibility on somebody else, right? Mm-hmm. Like you're responsible for the situation that you're in, whether or not you were dealt a bad hand, whether or not you didn't have this, you made choices, and this is where you are. But at the same time, the people who got you to where you are do have responsibility to guide you in the right direction. So when we talk about fatherlessness, like there is a sense of blame to go on a bad father for the place where his son ends up, right?
Yeah.
Like that's fair to say, I think.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's the weirdest thing when parents see their kids behaving a certain way and they're just like baffled. Like, I don't like they just met this kid. And it's like, what are you talking about? That's your thing. That's your fault. Like, you have some responsibility there, right? As far as like, I don't know why he does that. It's because you let him do that.
Yeah, it's your reason.
Because you always let him do that, and he thinks it's okay, and he thinks he runs the house, and whatever it is. Like there's some, look, people are different, and you can't. It's just like I did what I was supposed to do, and he just became a serial killer. It's like, okay, you're not. You know what I mean? Like there's some people that are just like
they're just broke.
Did everything right, or I did, and that's true. Like that's a hard reality too of like raising kids of thinking like I did what I was supposed to do. I think as far as like people honestly say like we didn't have high expectation, we didn't abuse him, we didn't neglect him, we didn't coddle him, whatever. And it's just like they're still just making mistakes. And there's a certain point where like look, they're just it's gonna be God's plan for them, not yours, right? It's like we did everything right, did all these things, and it's like yeah, but you're not God ultimately, and you're not dictating this person's destiny ultimately, and yeah, that's a hard thing to accept as a parent because you want to do everything right, and then you feel like you are, and things are still going wrong, But
I did notice he does pick up things like if I'm having an argument and he matches my cadence.
talk about your son, Gerard.
Yeah, Gerard, he'll match my cadence. He's 2, and he'll match like my cadence and my tone without saying words. Like he gets what I'm doing, so I'll be like, because this, and he's behind me babbling like ah, da, da, da. Like he gets what I'm doing, even though he doesn't understand the concept of it. So he's picking up that tendency, like, oh, this is how you deal with people by being aggressive and mimicking this stuff. It's like, oh man, I gotta stop doing that.
Yeah, they do, man. And you don't realize it until you see it in them.
Right.
Yeah,
Or you hear you say something, you're like, oh, I said that when we were in the car.
But it's good to realize that and not be just baffled by this new, like, where did they get that? Like, what do you think they got it? You know, from you, especially that young. You know, like you're their influence. What do you think? You know, yeah, I don't know. I wanted to read from this book too. The Masculine Mandate, required reading for every Christian man. I think one of the best words on biblical manhood. He had this really interesting thing, like the first one to go through. He says, "This is what modern and postmodern masculinity has been all about: men behaving like little boys forever, serving themselves in the name of self-discovery." What do you think about that? With the like self-discovery and like, yeah, I gotta find myself, and I gotta, this kind of selfish.
That's for sure a modern concept. Like, I imagine if you took somebody from the 1800s and you're like, what do you know about you? Like, what are you talking about? I'm just going to harvest so we don't starve.
Find yourself. Yeah. Did you ever watch that show, The Middle?
Yes.
The dad, and he's kind of like an old, kind of guy. And he's like, if for some reason he had to find a job. And he's in a job interview. And, of course, he's like a contractor for 20 years. And he's just like in this job interview. And they're like, how would you describe yourself? He's like, I wouldn't. They're like, but, well, who are you? He's like, how would you describe yourself? He's like, tall. Like, what are you talking about? I need to work. I have to work. He's trying to get a job, but it's like, find yourself.
That's interesting though, man. Like in modern corporate culture, like the personality test and like, where do you plug in?
Enneagrams. I'm an 8. Oh, I was like, well, what are you talking about?
You know where I plug in? Wherever you'll pay me to plug in, because I need a job. That's where I plug in.
Yeah.
But what's funny about The Middle is that the character, the dad, was the janitor on Scrubs.
Yeah.
Maybe the most whiny protagonist of all time.
They don't name it, just the janitor.
Yeah, just the janitor. I love him. I love that show. Yeah. But John Dorian is like one of the worst characters in all of television.
He epitomizes that find yourself, like,
yes,
your whole life. Like, you're narrating his own life.
Right.
Like, let me think about myself constantly, and like, but I mean, I do it too. Like, I think that people do it. Like, it's like I'm the star of the Solomon show, and what's going to happen next, and I got to make this movie interesting and meaningful, and it's like, who do you think you are? I guess.
I think that comes from a natural place too, as not just a man, but as a human, is like a yearning for purpose. Is because you were created with a purpose. You're not random. You're not an accident. You're not chance. There's a reason you're here. But in a world where there's no God, we have to define that for ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
I pop this up because I see you reading on the side.
Yeah, sorry.
No, it's okay. Because
it shows an entitled worldview and lack of culpability. Instead, he invents a new reality, a lot like we see now.
So
that's kind of what we're talking about as far as like entitled worldview, or like, I don't know. I think there's like I've read the book Fight Club too, and there's a hopelessness there.
Yes.
In this material, because he's just chasing the materialism and stuff, and he's got this lust for things,
right?
And then it all blows up, but that is kind of like a finding yourself, and it's actually a different person in your head. But finding meaning, letting go, like true freedom is letting everything go. And like, that's the nihilism. Like, you're putting too much hope and faith in these things that can be just blown up any second, and they are. And so what does that do to you? And so you have to like let go, let everything go. And then that letting go is freedom. That's like the theme of
the guy at the grocery store, right? When he pulls a gun on him and he tells him, if you're not on your way to this in a year, I'm going to come back and see you. It's like,
it's like giving up on dreams. Like when they're about to crash that car, and he's like, what is one thing you wish you did before you die? He's like, build a house, and like, paint a self-portrait. It's like, why haven't you done those things? You're not letting go. Like, you're hanging on to other, like, I think the purpose of Fight Club is like there's so much in this world that we're hanging on to and putting stock and meaning in. You talk about like bullcrap colors like cobalt and fuchsia,
Right.
you know,
Eggshell and mother
eggshell. Yeah, like all these like corporate mumbo jumbo stuff, and it's just like,
I mean, that's kind of a good point. That's kind of true.
yeah,
Like
there's a lot of truth, but it is that nihilistic, hopeless truth, you know.
Well, because at the end of the day, if you're an atheist and you're like, well, there's no hope in this material stuff, what is there hope in? Because that's all there is.
Yeah, well, and that's every like too smart for his own good atheist character, like the tortured genius, you know. I'm just like, oh, I know, I've like Rick and Morty, right? Like Rick is like, everything is meaningless and I know it, so it sucks. So I'm just gonna try and have a good time, whatever. Like that's you've reached the end of the Matrix, and you're like,
I mean, Dr. Manhattan and Watchmen. That's his whole thing, right? Everything is pointless. I can see the strings. We're just characters. I can't control anything.
Yeah.
Alan Moore almost has to like force him to find this meaning in Silk Spectre, because atheistically he's correct. Like, we're all just atoms in motion. None of this matters. Why should I get involved? There's no difference to me if the world blows up or it doesn't. I can see future, past, presidents all the same. None of this matters. Yeah. So Moore has to like force this, like, oh, he sees wonder in the everyday person. Like, why? It doesn't make any sense from his worldview. Yeah,
well, and there is that like romanticism to being lost. It's like, well, we don't know, and we're just a pale blue dot drifting in the cosmos. And it's like, what are you talking about? Then why are you getting upset at school shootings? What are you talking about? You know, there's more to it than that. You know, you're finding we're meaningless atoms finding meaning, looking for meaning. What are you talking about? We should have no capacity for that. Well, you know, how do weeds look for meaning? They don't, and neither should we. You know, because we're basically same thing on different scales.
That's kind of counterculture masculinity. Like, counterculture masculinity is the beautiful drifter, right? Like the starving artist. The worst thing that can happen to you is success and meaning.
Yeah, or think you know something.
Right.
Like the guy who knows, like, oh, I've got it all figured out. It's like, oh, that's the idiot.
That's the loser.
That's
I saw Office Space for the first time not so long ago.
Really?
Yeah, the first time I ever saw it. I'd never seen Office Space before.
Oh,
and it's kind of that, right? Like, the beauty is when he realizes that none of this matters and it's all pointless.
Yeah,
then right? That's now he can do it. Now he can go after what he actually wants in life. And now,
have you seen American Beauty?
I've never seen American Beauty. It's
like Fight Club for girls. With Kevin Spacey and what's her face? Yeah, he's this guy. He's a middle-aged suburban guy who, like, falls in love with one of his daughter's friends, and like he just starts working out, starts smoking weed again. He basically just reverts back to his boyhood. Again, it's like, oh, you know, adulthood was something to be put off. That's another thing about masculinity, of like, marriage is game over. And like, oh, put off adulthood as long as possible. Be a 19-year-old idiot for as long as possible. That's the best time. It's all downhill from there. It's like, what a terrible way to look. It's just not true.
But I mean, it has to be true in a godless world, right? I saw that. I'll pop this up here too.
Was it?
Calls back to your podcast a month or so ago. You had to discredit your own sinful nature for the way you are. So, for instance, you know, we can say, oh, well, it's my father's fault or it's society's fault. It's not my fault that I'm the way I am, is what you said in Fight Club, basically.
Yeah. And there is selfishness. Yeah, like, just because you're selfish, you can't realize it doesn't make you less selfish, though. It is true. I mean, like, the guy, the main character, the narrator, he doesn't have a name, but the narrator in Fight Club is selfish, because it is about, like, well, he's just trying to find his own fulfillment, and there's like very little regard for how he can pour into other people, or what he has a responsibility to, like, do something or whatever. That was one of the things you said, right, about responsibility and what did you say?
Right. Like the true is responsibility and sacrifice. Taking on responsibility and sacrificing yourself for others.
Yeah.
And, you know, the irony of Fight Club is that his savior was within himself the whole time, right? Like, the person who came and changed his life was himself. Just he didn't realize it.
Yeah. Spoilers.
It's been 20 years, 30 years.
Same guy. Yeah.
It's been forever at this point.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that was, I think, Wilson. It was either Wilson or one of the people from Christchurch who was talking about it, that radical sacrifice is the defining trait of masculinity.
Yeah.
And if we look at it from, a biblical perspective, the ultimate man, the true man, Jesus, did those two things. He took the ultimate responsibility for humanity, and he made the ultimate sacrifice for humanity.
Yeah.
Without those things, we'd all still be dead, and there's no hope. Like to bring hope, that's what he had to do.
Sacrifice. Yeah. I mean, Jesus is the ultimate man. You want to find out what being a man is Jesus. Like that's what I mean. Of course, that's the easy Sunday school answer. But like, what would you say? Well, let's look into that. So Jesus Christ is the what it means to be a man, and like specifically male, right?
Right.
Human, sure, but male. He was a male. He is a male, and that. So what is that? So how would you say that Jesus exemplifies the perfect man?
I mean, there was things that he did that I guess we don't think about him doing. Like the cultural idea of Jesus is like the peace, love Jesus, right? Like he was nice to everybody. He made everybody lunch. He valued women. He was, that's the Jesus that everybody's comfortable with. He was soft spoken and he looked out for everybody, but he also was confrontational. Meek, yes.
Yeah.
But he was confrontational. Like he was a man who stood up when it was time to stand up. He cleared the temple. And what's interesting about the clearing of the temple in context is that the area that he cleared out was the courtyard of the Gentiles. That was the area designated for the non-Jews to like pay tribute to God or pay homage to God. And it had been turned into an area. The Jews had basically monopolized it. They're like, well, this is where we do our commerce, and then we go into the temple. So there's no more place for the Gentiles. And he came and ripped that apart to open it up again. So like he saw injustice and he fought it. He stood up against a sense of cowardice, because when we look at the Pharisees and the Sadducees, they were cowards. Like they weren't willing to take him on in public, but they were willing to find false witnesses and plot against him in a kangaroo court.
Yeah.
So he had boldness. He had a sense of almost a lack of decorum in a way, but it was always fueled by zeal for the Lord.
Yeah.
Which is the difference. It was always channeled as doing the will of God, doing the work of God, reaching the people for God. It was never to display his own machismo in any way.
Yeah. Or like you find yourself and be find the way you are. It's like, no, we need to follow God.
I came to do.
Yeah. You're freezing. Froze. You're frozen, bro.
Back. And there we go.
We
dropped out for a second, but we're back. Okay.
I didn't drop out. You dropped out.
I dropped out. I hit the signal and it dropped out. But, the whole thing with Jesus, he says, I came to do the will of him who sent me. Or when he's in the garden about to do the thing, he says, if it's possible, let this cup pass from me. And I think we minimize the cup.
But thy will be done.
Right.
Yeah.
And we think when we talk about the cup, we think about, he was about to be crucified and that's pain. Like, yes, that's true. But the cup that he's talking about was the wrath of God about to be satisfied on him.
Yeah.
A thing that we can't fathom. He knew he was about to take in full.
Yeah.
If it'd be possible, let it pass from me, but nevertheless, not my will. Like his will was secondary always to the will of the Father.
Yeah.
Which is, that's something that we, like you were saying, if marriage is to be put off until, as far as possible. When you're done living your life, then you go and get married, then you settle down. Yeah. But the first thing that, man does, man's created, man goes to work, and then man gets married. Like that's what happens in the creation story. That's what we're here to do. Work, cultivate, get married, have children. That's part of it all.
Yeah, that's what this masculine mandate talks about, points to Genesis 2:15. Says the Lord God took the man and put him in the garden of Eden to work it and keep it. And what Richard Phillips does in this book, Masculine Mandate, is he basically says that sums it up, work and keep. That's the masculine mandate, is to work and keep. And it says, taken together, these two words serve as a summary of the Bible's mandate for masculine behavior. The Lord took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and keep it. And it's kind of cool. Do you ever read Wild at Heart?
No.
It's the guy, I forget his name. He talks about it in this book. John Eldredge, Wild at Heart. He talks about how, I guess the whole premise of Wild at Heart, I read it when I was in high school. I don't really remember it much, but I remember it being like okay or something. And I think it was pretty good, but I think his premise, what Richard Phillips talks about, is that John Eldredge says that man was created outside of the garden, right? And then he was put into the garden. but his original creation was outside of the garden.
Mhm.
And so there was like this idea of like man being wild and like born for the outdoors and born for the like noble savage kind of thing, I guess. But Richard Phillips' kind of critique on that is like, but God put him in the garden. Like, what are you talking about? Like, that's a man's place is in the home,
Right.
you know, and yeah, like God put him in the garden and for a reason, and it's like to work it and keep his family, and to like you said, responsibility. Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's an important part about the idea of fighting too. Like, kind of in the creation mandate, there's an aggression built into it, right? Like, to subdue the earth is to do battle with the earth, right? Like, bend it to your will, plow this, till it, grow it, make something happen.
Yeah.
Or animals, right? The idea of like you will have dominion over them is like you tame them, you bring them down so that they're useful to you. But what that does is make them useful to you and society and your family. Like, you make something that's profitable and good, right?
Mhm.
Whereas most of the time, the secular idea of like fighting is to fight for glory or bragging rights or something like that. Like, it doesn't actually do anything for anyone but yourself.
Yeah.
It's
They're
almost
like
like
productive, constructive.
right, exactly.
Yeah.
Like the urge to fight is built in also. It's hardwired. Like you're built for conflict. You're built for struggle. But it's the kind of Nate Wilson talks about. He has a great talk about troublemakers on it was at one of the conferences they did. And he talks about like, God put them in the garden, and the first thing they have to do is fight the serpent. Like, the serpent was already there in creation. It wasn't like he showed up somewhere. He wasn't supposed to be there and he showed up. Like, it's already there. And the conflict is set from the beginning. Like, here's your job. You're in a garden. The rest of the world's a desert. Make the rest of the world look like this.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a big part of it. Yeah.
Conflict is built into this stuff, and we still have that. We just, in a secular society that's told you have no purpose, you have no meaning, you didn't come from anywhere, you're not going to anywhere, this is all you have. Well, what do I do with that urge to have conflict other than just fight for the sake of fighting?
Yeah.
There's no
there's a mandate of conquest in that for Eden. Like, the purpose wasn't just to stay, like, there's a planet, but you're supposed to stay in this garden.
Right.
What? That's not, I don't think that was the case. From this book, he says, Richard Phillips says, although the introduction of sin into the garden changed the nature of work, God's calling for man to work is entirely holy and good. Bruce Waltke rightly says, quote, work is a gift of God, not a punishment for sin. Even before the fall, humanity had duties to perform. It was after God told Adam to be fruitful by means of his work that God declared that creation was, quote, very good. One in Genesis 1:31. So yeah, it's like there was always work. It was just, well, now you're gonna sweat, and now it's gonna till it hard. It's gonna be uncomfortable. That's another thing he says too. Somewhere in here he says it doesn't make things different. It makes things painful. Sin, it doesn't make things different. It makes things painful, right? And so like I'll bring pain in childbirth. It's like, well, was there childbirth before that wasn't painful? I mean, maybe, I don't know. Yeah, my mom said, "What if you're a single man?"
Right, which is a good question.
The answer to that is get married. Like, honestly, like that's the answer, is to get married. I think men have a responsibility to get married, unless, like Paul, you have a outlier, very rare gift of singleness, and I think you'll know it. I think there's certain nuances to that, certain specific things with that, but I think generally, usually, get married. Like, that should be a goal of every man, is to get married and have a family, because it was not good for Adam to be alone.
Right.
He didn't say like, oh, well, he's alone, I'm going to give him the gift of singleness. Say, no, he needs a woman. He needs a woman. It's the only thing that God created that said is not good.
Right.
He created the stars, he created the heavens, it was very good, and he said it was good, and it was good. And he created man. It is not good for man to be alone. And it's like, it's the only thing in his creation that he said is not good, and he fixed it by creating him a woman. And yeah, so like I think men, like, that's part of it, is to be man, to be married.
So what's the
men that want to? Right. But until then, work. Work and build and construct and do things, but be looking for a woman that should be part of it. Like, oh, he doesn't have a job until then. What until then? What do you mean until then? Until he gets one?
Right.
Looking
for one.
Yeah, like you should be looking for one, applying for one, building your credentials as a man of an eligible bachelor man to, uh, yeah. I mean, until then, sanctification. Until then, discipline yourself. Until then, prepare yourself for marriage. Learn from married men, as mentors and stuff, and then get married. Like that should be part of the goal is to get married.
Right.
And yeah, I mean,
And I mean,
it's easy. I'm not saying like, oh, just like get a girlfriend or whatever. Like
right.
it's just.
I mean,
Yeah. I mean, yeah, like, yeah, take care of your parents. Yeah, plenty of people take care of before you get married. Sure.
well, I mean, that's part of masculinity, though, is the idea that we have to take care of stuff or people or things. Like the idea of taking care of someone or something that's not yourself is abhorrent to modern culture.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's like is this responsibility.
Yeah.
And your ultimate responsibility is your own happiness in modern culture. So why would you put off whatever to take care of somebody else? Why would you give of yourself, your time, your money, anything for somebody else?
Yeah. So Richard Phillips again. Again, we're like going through this. Well, that was that book too, but this one too. It says, it is true that the Apostle Paul identified a, quote, gift of singleness that he wished all men had, 1 Corinthians 7:7. He was referring to the ability some men possess to devote themselves to serving God without the encumbrances of marriage. So unless you have the gift of Paul, the gift Paul referred to, it is imperative for you, for your well-being, that you be married, to move beyond the, quote, not good status of single adulthood. Says today, when God looks on single males and says not good, he undoubtedly has in mind a long list of truly unfit helpers, among them the pornography, video games, sports obsession, and empty pizza boxes that are intrinsic to so many young adult male lives, even among Christians. Our society tells young adult men to deprive themselves of God's provision for their physical, emotional, and sexual needs so they can remain as immature and self-absorbed as possible for as long as possible. You know what the Bible says about this. It is not good. I mean, that's true. Like, yeah, fill your life up with all this other bullcrap instead of getting married. Put it off as long as possible and just revel in all these stupid things until so you have to get married to like your girlfriend pressures you. And that's the other thing is these I think it's hilarious. These guys live with girls with a girlfriend for like 5 years and think they're not married.
Right.
It's like, you crazy? Like, you're married, bro. But
I mean, we have like we were talking about earlier when we talked about the industrialization and how it made everything easier. Like it also gave us free time.
Mm-hmm.
What we need all those other things for, I had to fill up that free time because before, like, what free time? What are you talking about? I get up at sunrise and I work till sunset. There's no free time. I got a farm. I got kids. I got all of this stuff. I'm in the factory. There is no free time. Now there's an abundance of free time.
Yeah, and I think we worked to like innovate in technology and all those things to get that free time without any implication of like how we should be spending that free time. So you're right. A lot of technology and new things for the modern world give us a lot of time to play video games or to watch TV. You know what I mean? Like Netflix is working on that free time thing for us. You know? Like they got plenty of television to binge, and nothing to produce and create yourself. And it's becoming this like consumer culture, just like, well, I'm going to entertain myself to death because I can. And there's a new episode on, and there's a new movie out, and there's a new whatever, So it's just looking for the next little thrill till we die. And we have all this free time, and then we just like blow it all away.
I mean, you're talking about producing something yourself of value, like. I feel like a lot of people don't think they can. A lot of men specifically don't think they can, right?
Yeah.
And I think, man, it's a two-edged sword because on the one side, we have free time that we fill with, nothingness, right? YouTube holes and Netflix binge watching and all of that stuff. On the other hand, our work is also kind of nothingness that we fill with just fluff, right? Like you're a cog in a machine. You do a thing. Work is soulless now in the modern world. Right? Like in the older times, there was that idea of like, well, I'm working so that my family eats this winter, right? Like my family farm that was handed down to me from my father that I'll pass down to my son. We till this and we make this and we build because this is our thing. And there was fulfilling that way. We don't really have that. Like you don't own the company you work for. You don't see the product of your work. You're basically contracted. Like you're going to do this for me, and I'm going to give you this, and that's the end of this. That's all it is to you.
Which is a form of slavery. It's not owning the production of your work. You make all these things, and you're doing all this labor and work, and you don't get any sort of benefit from it, really. I mean, I'm going to pay you to do it, but that's it. And I'm not going to pay you anymore. And you're going to constantly wanting more from you without,
right. And that's where you get the weekend warrior. Like 5 days a week, I'm a schlub in a cubicle.
Everybody's working for the weekend.
On the weekend, I'm in Africa doing safari, so I don't feel like a dentist. Or I take kickboxing on the weekend and I spar a little bit so I can feel like that manly rush that I don't get during the week.
Yeah.
It just, I don't know. It just sounds like never will I ever get off the grid. That's a horrible idea. That's saying disengage from society, and I think that's an idea that the apostles would abhor. So.
Yeah, off grid. I listened to, speaking of manliness, Art of Manliness episode. They did a re-air from last year of this guy with minimalism, or like living off the grid. Talking about living off the grid, and it sounded terrible. And he was going on about it as if it was like a great way to live your life and stuff. I'm like, bro, you're talking about an outhouse, bro. And then he's talking about like, oh yeah, it costs a lot of money to get set up with your own well. He's talking about well to dig your own well for your own water costs like $25,000. Like, oh yeah, because I work a day schlub just having that lying around to go. That's what I'm saying. Of course, who doesn't want to live out in the woods in a cabin with a nice view and nice weather and nice, whatever. It's like, sure, you know how much that costs. Again, like it costs money. It does. Like it's gonna take time to like spend money to like save up for that, and then yeah, it's just tough, man. Like you gotta be rich to live that simply. We talked about like how 50, 60 years ago, well actually like 80 years ago, only poor people had horses.
Right.
But now only rich people have horses because they can afford a barn and afford the land and afford the attendants to take care. And it's like, well, now only rich people. It's like we've done this flip flop, and now all poor people driving their own cars, and it's like, wow.
Well, I mean, I listened to a podcast a couple weeks ago from Darren Doan. Moscow, Idaho is like the hub of biblical man.
Yeah, that's off grid. That's as off grid as you'll go, right?
Snow is what keeps me from going. I'm too acclimated to this Texas 105 weather. I can't do it in the snow.
It might be really good though.
Darren Doan was talking about the sin of minimalism and how. Minimalism is this idea that we're going to scale down, only the bare minimum of what we need. We don't need this big space. But then at the end of your life, you end up having nothing to give to anyone because you didn't spend your time building or cultivating anything. All you did was scale down.
That's a post-mill view.
Right. Yeah, that is a post-mill view. Well, I mean, maybe if somebody was post-mill, they wouldn't be minimalist, but that's a conversation for another time.
Get the shrinking mindset, growing mindset.
That's actually like this too. Like poor people used to eat lobster. It was a low creature. It's a bottom feeder.
Yeah, that's true, right? Man. It's weird, man. Like it's all these weird. You see some dude in $500 shoes at the bus stop and a phone. Like the poorest people, especially in America, have a smartphone.
Oh yeah,
and a car and a house, and it's like they're broke, living paycheck to paycheck, and it's like, what the heck? That you're rich 50 years ago, like, but yeah.
I mean, you're living better than any king in history ever lived. You have air conditioning, you're doing great,
bro. Like anytime, that's why I think I've said it before. Anytime anybody talks about like, oh, which era would you like to live in? What decade would you rather? It's like right now. I would not want to live in any other. Like the roaring 20s, or it's like, oh my god, they didn't have air conditioning, they didn't have deodorant, took one bath a week.
Oh man, can you imagine wearing like those 3-piece tweed suits with no deodorant?
Oh I was watching a movie or something. We were watching something, and God, it just everybody's in a suit.
Yeah,
from the 40s or 50s, and it's like, ugh, it just looks hot. I'm thinking of San Antonio, like all the layers. Ugh. I mean, you look sharp, but you're just soaked.
That's where you carry
a layer of sweat.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah,
those
dab it off.
Southern dandies
Oh man.
wilting in the heat.
You know, uh, I forget who talked about it also, but about how in a lack of real masculinity and a lack of responsibility and a lack of all of that thing, we put on the vestments of masculinity. So we grow beards or we wear suits or we stuff like that. Like,
Yeah,
oh, this is manliness, this is dapperness or barbershop culture or car culture or whatever it is. Because it's a superficial masculinity.
stereotype.
Right. We do the stereotypical thing because the real stuff's hard. Like get married and have kids and start a
Yeah.
business. And that's I don't know about that stuff.
That's something I think about with Joe Rogan, because I think Joe Rogan kind of epitomizes the modern liberal man, like just on that edge of, like, people call him toxic masculinity, but he's also very liberal and very, like, tolerant in things. So, but and he has, like, Cameron Haynes on, he's got David Goggins on, he's got Jocko Willink on, right? He's got, like, all these Navy SEAL guys, all these ultra marathon runners, all these, like, cool, like, motivational manly men kind of, like, characters, right? You know what I never ever hear any of them talking about? Family
Mm.
and marriage. And I noticed that because I watch a lot of Joe Rogan. I'm like, man, this is really great. I'm like, this guy never talks about his family. This guy never talks about how to be a good father.
Mm.
Like, he never talks about how to be a good husband. He never talk. It's all about, like, live your dream and your goals and your potential and leave nothing off. And, like, it's good. Men should be productive and chase their dreams and be productive and ambitious and those kinds of things. But he's really neglecting, and I think a lot of like the best the world can offer of manliness neglects those things, like family and uh, husband and children and like wife and all those kinds of things.
Podcast of his recently. I don't remember which one it was because they all run together. But they were talking about stuff and how he was like, oh, well, if you're a man and you want to keep stuff, you got to get a place like this. He was talking about his studio, right? And like his studio, he has the full gym, he has the kickboxing setup, he has the archery set. He's basically built a playground.
That's a dream. That's
Right.
a
It's a dream, right? It's everything you
dream.
want. But it
I want to
becomes
be able to, like, light a cigar right here, like, inside. Like, that's a big deal. Is like, how can I smoke a cigar inside the air condition? That is like, if you get that, you've made it. You got that set up at your house or something, in your office or wherever. Like, you've made it. You got a ventilation system, build your own house with a so you can smoke inside. Man,
well, I mean, that's an important aspect of one of the things about masculinity that's kind of lost is like the communal aspect of masculinity. Like in modern society, ideally, where we should be more connected because of all the ways we have to keep in touch with each other, we're less connected. Like we're more isolated, we're more solo, we're more alone.
yeah,
We don't have like in masculinity in the past, it was this idea of like your brothers in arms, or you were members of this, or you were associates through this. Like we don't really have that fraternal idea.
yeah. Band of brothers, kind of
Right, exactly.
thing that binds us.
Right.
But that goes to sports. I mean, that's how a lot of people, I think, have it now. But I mean, after high school or college, if you're not playing sports or whatever, it's like, yeah, well, then it is your family. And then it's like, well, this isn't a team I'm on. This is a unit that I have responsibility for, and that I can't, have I don't know. There is that, like, camaraderie and that companionship of that men need in community. I mean, I would say that in an ideal world, I think it can happen, and I've seen it, is the church being that place for men to meet other like-minded men with right goals and a godly worldview and perspective on these things. We're talking about biblical manhood, and, like, well, I don't want to just, like, drink beer and drive big trucks and, like, what is that? What does it mean to be a man? They're getting all the answers from the world, from television and from whatever bullcrap, and no, like, real true answers, and no true companionship, no true friendship, and that sort of, like, male camaraderie. And yeah, that's something we could probably talk about too, is like the feminization of the church.
Yes.
Like, that's huge.
The thing about the feminization of the church is it goes hand in hand with the abdication of responsibility of the church.
Yeah.
Like all the things that the church used to do, the orphanages, the charities, all the things we used to do, we don't do that anymore.
Yeah.
Somebody else can do that. What program do you have for me this week? Where am I going to put my kids all summer long? What are you guys running for that?
Yeah.
It's become kind of a fill up. Like Sunday, I need to get my fill up. I need my thing to get me through the week. What does the sermon say about my life? What's the application for me right now?
Yeah.
What?
It's just another thing we consume.
Right.
It's another, like, I need my little motivational pick me up and stuff. When I think a real big thing is like, well, what role do you have in the church? Like, what's your responsibility in the church? And it's huge. You have one. As far as leadership, like, so I grew up in a very little church in Wichita Falls, and all the men ran the church. Like, they led Sunday school, they led the youth group, they led worship, the music in the morning, they preached. They did, I mean, a lot of things. They're all married, and now all the wives did everything too. But all the men were active leaders in the church. I could think of like tiny, like a few guys, men in the church who like did nothing. Like it just wasn't a thing. Everybody did something and participated and helped and did stuff. And as a kid, with like, not, my dad wasn't around, that was great because I got like all these positive Christian male influences in my life. And my mom says she never felt like she wasn't married. Like, it's like there's always provision. There was always kind of, I'd go hunting with my friends and their dad and stuff, and we'd do stuff, and it was good. It was really good. And I think that's the proper male role in the church, is that leadership of like, we're gonna come by the fatherless and widow and take care of that, and that's our responsibility, to our community, to our church, to our family, and that just kind of extends out. But yeah, I think Doug Wilson talks about the feminization of the church in this book. I wish I would be able to like flag this a little bit more, but because he does talk about like how like the songs, like the I forget what song it is, in the garden.
Oh, I think I know. Is it and he walks with me and he talks with me and he tells me that I am his own?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
What's the song, man? Because I always felt weird with some of these too, where it was like, something, let my words be true, Jesus, I'm so in love with you. I was like, I don't know how I feel about this.
I don't want to sing that.
Right? I mean, like, we're talking about another man. Are we forgetting that? And I think we do forget that a little bit in the church. We have this ethereal idea of Jesus, like, oh, this mystical spirit in the sky. It's like, yeah, but he was also a dude with calluses and blisters, and
he's a carpenter.
Yeah, he was a carpenter.
Well, I think that a lot of that has to do with I can't find it. Has to do with that's a times thing too, because if you read Spurgeon, and like some of the older guys, they'll say stuff like our husband Christ, or Christ's husband, or something like that. And they'll kind of speak in those terms of like, we're the bride, and he's the groom, and but without any sort of insecurity or any sort of like. So I think it's kind of a thing of the times, and that kind of goes back to what you're talking about. Like, if you read biographies of the founding fathers, and like some of the letters they write to their male friends, it's like, hey, did you like him? Did you like him? Or like, it's really weird. But they just spoke floral back then, and they just kind of like were very in touch with your like emotions and stuff. It wasn't. I think that came later, of like, you can't feel anything or whatever. But,
because now that's like the thing, right? If you want to show affection to another guy, you punch him or something.
Yeah, you can't. It's like, but that's an insecurity. Whereas like a secure guy would be able to say something like that.
Well, I think that's part of the culture is the problem for that too, with like the proliferation of feminization, but also of like homosexuality. Like now there is that, like, well, I don't want to look gay. Like, well, that's a new concern. Like, that's not anybody else had at any point.
Yeah, because it's like, well, that's not a thing, or that's like, or that. Yeah, it was a thing though, but it wasn't like, oh, so ready to be like, oh, that person's feminine, or that person, so he's gay.
I mean, it's weird that there's like fathers of children. I have a wife and kids, but I don't want to look gay. Like, what are you talking about? You have a wife and kids. No one's doubting that you're,
Yeah.
And it's very strange.
Well, that's like on Seinfeld, when George is like, he's like, oh, don't you think he's attractive? He's like, how should I know? She's like, just admitting that a man is attractive doesn't make you gay. Doesn't help.
But I mean, that extends to other things too, right? Like we talk a lot about the idea of masculinity as like the ability to, Lewis talked about chivalry a lot.
Mhm.
And he talks
Yeah.
about how chivalry was a two-part thing. It was a two-part system. In a time of war, you had to be willing to fight, but in a time of peace, you had to be willing to be peaceful.
Yeah.
He was saying, a man who's not willing to fight in a time of war is a coward, but a man who's unwilling to be peaceful is a bully and a
Yeah.
brute. And it's not good to be either one.
Yeah.
And we kind of have, like, it goes beyond just not even being able to admit that another man is a good-looking man, but it's the ability to admire the beauty in things.
Yeah.
Like, we can't have emotions about, like, we can't be moved by anything.
Yeah.
Like, if you cried during a movie, like, oh, okay, well, clearly you're a woman.
Well, again, that's another. Joe Rogan had Bill Burr on recently, and Bill Burr was talking about that, and he's talked about that a lot in his stand-up stuff about like, why I don't want to pet this dog because someone think I'm gay, or it's like I can't say happy birthday.
What about when the guy got offended because the guy offered him a cookie? Like, yeah, I want a cookie, but I asked for it. You don't tell me that.
Yeah, but there's that insecurity, and it's funny because he's like, I can't say that sunset's beautiful. Because and then Joe Rogan's like, I would say that. He's like, well, of course you can say it. You can kick everyone's ass here. He's like, people want you to say that because then it's like, oh, he's calm. He's not going to beat us up. He's like, but if you can't beat somebody up, then you can't say, it's like, and that's the thing. That's an interesting thing about masculinity too, is that like, it's not about I can beat everybody up. It's that I can beat everybody up and I'm not going to. It's that reserve strength.
Yes.
Instead of like fake strength. It's like, I know that I'm strong and I know that I'm capable and competent, whatever, but I'm going to be gentle. It's that gentleness because I could kill you.
Right.
Or something. You know what I mean? It's like that. There's something to that as far as like masculinity of like this reserved, withheld wrath and violence and strength or something.
There's a biblical component to that in 2 Timothy when Paul talks about the servant of God. He talks about how he has to contend with his enemy with gentleness.
Yeah.
So that he not with quarrelsomeness, so that he may come to his senses and be snatched from death. Or when he talks in Philemon, he makes a point that even though you owe me so much and I could assert my authority, I'm going to appeal to you as a brother, not as one in charge of you. Like, that's a very biblical concept that, like, yes, I have this strength and this ability, but that's not how I'm coming to you. I'm coming to you in peace.
And that's, again, the ultimate picture of Jesus as man, of that meekness was not a weakness. It's a reserved strength. He could have called down a legion of angels, right? Yes. But he didn't. He and he had having all the power of God, you know what I mean? Like, and that pouring out of God and taking on the status of a person and a slave and even unto death, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's this chosen submissive sort of inferior status or whatever that's chosen, not like, well, that's all I have. Hang on, I'll be right back. Hang on.
You see that in pictures of Christ that you see throughout the Bible too. Like, we talk about types of Christ or Christ types in the scriptures, where you see people like Moses or people like David. David is probably the best example of that. When he catches Saul off guard in a cave, he has him at that point where he's like, I could kill you and I would end all of my problems right here. And he cuts the hem of his garment and then shows it to him to display that, like, look, I had you and I didn't take it, as almost like a peace offering at that point. And at that point, Saul realizes his fault, which of course he goes back on later. But that idea of, like, I have the strength to do this thing and I'm not going to do it. I'm going to humble myself. That's I think what he was referencing when it says that though being God, did not consider equality with God a thing to be grasped, but humbled himself and took on the form of a servant, even to the point of death. I was saying how, if we look at the Old Testament, the pictures of Christ that we see that are coming, the messianic types, you see that same kind of characteristic. Like in David, when he caught Saul off guard in the cave, he had him, but he cut his hem instead of killing him, and then he shows it to him, like, I had you, but I didn't take.
That's more powerful than just killing him.
Right. It's like the knowledge I could have, but I didn't.
Yeah. I want to find that in the heart. Proverbs was written for boys.
Mm. That's interesting. So another man, if you got time, Pastor Toby Sumter gives a speech called "Do Not Give Your Strength to Women," that comes from Proverbs 31.
Mm.
And he talks about how Proverbs 31, we always think of the Proverbs 31 woman, but we never think of the Proverbs 31 man.
Hmm.
And it's about the idea that a king.
How dare you?
I'm anti-feminist right here. I hate women. It's all coming out. How the idea of giving your strength to women is something that happens to somebody like Solomon, the king, not the man I'm talking to. And how you see, like, in the beginning, he seems like he's on track. He builds the temple, he does all this stuff, but then he marries all these women, and he commissions for them temples to their gods and high places for their worship, and then he bankrupts, and that's where you get one of my favorite pictures of bad masculinity leading to bad masculinity is after Solomon has died, his son is taking the throne, and his advisors tell him, hey, your father levied a lot of heavy taxes on the people. It would be good for you to relieve some of those to curry favor. And instead, he comes out to the people and he says, my little finger is thicker than my father's waist, which the jargon he's saying is not talking about his father's waist. He's talking about something else. And he's saying, my little finger is bigger. I'm 10 times the man he ever was. And he scourged you with whips. I'll scourge you with scorpions. And then at that moment, the kingdom falls apart. He tried to assert his manliness, and that's what happens. He lost his kingdom.
Yeah.
He just didn't know how to pull back and didn't know how to do the humble thing, which humbleness is a masculine quality. Humbleness is kind of feared because humbleness is seen as weakness, I think.
Yeah.
Right? And we don't want to be weak because that's unmanly.
Yeah, but only weak men are worried about that.
Right.
And then that reveals your weakness. If you're just like, the worst thing than being weak is pretending to be strong when you're weak. Right? It's like the toupee or something. It's like the worst thing about being bald is about being insecure about being bald. You gotta own it. You gotta just take that.
You just go with it.
You can't. Yeah, just go with it, man. Like, that's more pathetic to just wear a toupee. Like, come on.
I mean,
to put that mask on or to put that front on is just
that all the time.
The Napoleon complex and stuff.
The guy with the tap out shirt. Like, nobody thinks you can fight. You're not fooling anyone. You bought that at Hot Topic. Like, no one's fooled by this.
But it's easier to buy the tap out shirt than train.
And to train, right?
Right. It's like, well, I'll just buy the shirt. I don't have to work out and actually get it for real. Have the black belt nobody knows about.
Right.
I'll wear the tap out shirt. I'll wear the, I'll roid out or whatever. And it's like, you're not. But then you actually get into a fight and it's like, oh, crap. You get tested.
Right.
It's like, oh, crap. Yeah.
But I mean, getting tested is an important thing too. Like, a lot of guys have never been tested, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, we've built a world where you don't have to be tested anymore.
Yeah.
It's almost shameful. Like, oh, how did you end up in that situation?
Yeah. It's really weird. I was thinking about how we say oh, we can't just coddle kids because they get to the real world and they won't be prepared. But now they're growing up and they're voting in different policies that give everyone a trophy.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's like, oh, we didn't see that coming. We thought the real world would slap them in the face. It's like, no, they're trying to change the real world. They're trying to change how the world operates. I don't think they can. I don't think a lot of, these things can't happen just because human beings are going to keep being human beings.
Right.
And they just don't know what to do with that because they're trying to change society. And again, it goes back to the only thing that can change man is Christ.
Right.
You're dead in your sins and trespasses, and God makes you alive, brings life. That regeneration. People are trying to reach regeneration through materialistic, flesh, bodily things, right? And that again goes to the materialism of the godless worldviews of predominantly now Marxism, of the left. Marxism is strictly material, and I think by a changing of the materialism, we can remake human beings. The whole thing of Marxism is human beings as the way we are because of society of other human beings, I guess. And we have to change that society. We have to tear down the society and rebuild something new. Not reform, not tweak, not redirect, destroy, and then rebuild. And only then can humans change.
And the irony of that is That's a
Material.
misguided creation mandate. It's
Yeah.
still the idea that you can't fight that need to build and tame and fight. You just have it pointed in the wrong direction. And I think kind of one of the things I came to looking at all this stuff is that there is toxic masculinity. It's secular masculinity. It's unguided masculinity. It's unfocused masculinity. That's toxic masculinity.
Yeah.
Like there's nothing wrong with needing to fight. There's nothing wrong with needing to cultivate. There's nothing wrong with needing to build. There's nothing wrong with being confrontational. It's just it's aimed at the wrong place. Yeah. So when your fight is aimed at tearing down society to make it easier on yourself, or when your strive is to do the greatest thing that makes you the most satisfied in life, it's like, well, you're misguided. That's the problem. It's not that these things are bad. It's that we need to put them in the right direction.
Yeah. I mean, the left anti-capitalism or capitalists are just as obsessed as with money as the capitalists are. They just believe it's in the wrong hands.
Right.
I mean, that's what it is. You ask any leftist, Marxist, progressive, godless worldview of anything, say, how do we make a change in our society? The answer will be money. We just need more money for funding, for policies, for programs, for government-funded programs, government-funded this, policy making this, whatever, and it takes money. They're just as obsessed with money. They just think, like you said, it's going the wrong direction.
Right.
It's just as obsessed with the materialistic, superficial things. It's just, it just needs to be going that way. It's like, you're working with the wrong thing. It's not materialism, right?
Now, the scary thing is...
And they'll say, what else is there? Exactly.
We have to work with.
Yeah.
The scary thing is the world is at a point now where I didn't think it would be before. Just looking at stuff from like 10 years ago that was on TV or whatever, it's like it's a different world.
Yeah.
So thinking 10 years down the line, 15 years down the line, having a son who's 2 now, who's going to be 17 at some point, 18 at some point, who's going to be in the world.
Yeah.
It's like, his masculinity, if it's biblical, is not going to fit. Like, it's just not.
Yeah.
In that society that he's inheriting.
What's something that you think is like super crazy? There's no way. Whatever it is, we'll be there. Look, we're talking about defund the police. You told me 10 years ago, defund the police would be a campaign platform. I tell you, you're out of your mind. That's where we are. No police. Which the doors are open. Think of the craziest thing. That's why I don't understand there's been no rational argument against the slippery slope idea of anything of the godless worldviews that come up with this. It's like, oh, well, we could do this, or pretty soon you're gonna have this. Oh, come on. Oh, it's all you get is eye rolls.
Right.
Oh, why can't a man marry a dog? Oh my God, what is wrong with you? Are you insane? Oh, roll. It's like, we're talking about defund the police, and there's no such thing as gender, and there's no, like, what are you talking about? Like, it's just insanity. And so whatever craziness thing you can think of, we have to start thinking about drawing a line somewhere in our society, because obviously there's no such thing as lines. There's no such thing as chalk to draw the line. So what are we talking about?
I mean, historically, that's what men have always done, is draw the line.
Yeah, work and keep. That's the whole, like, to bring it back to the masculine mandate, work and keep. Keep what? Keep society, keep your family, keep these things in line of kind of like an order out, not chaos. You work and keep, responsibility and sacrifice.
But I mean, the problem with that is that implies a respect for the people who came before you. Yeah. Honor your father and mother. That's a biblical mandate. There's no secular category for that kind of thing. Like, I talked about this with somebody before where they were like, well, you can understand like the good intention behind environmentalism. And I was like, no, I can't, because stewardship is a biblical concept. That's not a secular concept. So I can't understand the rationale behind environmentalism because they don't have a category for that. It doesn't make any sense. And that's the same idea. Like, we look at a society that was handed to us by people behind us that, like, yeah, they made some mistakes, but they worked to build a thing to hand off to us.
Yeah.
We look at that as like, well, let's preserve this thing. Let's make it better. Let's fix where they went wrong. Whereas the secular society, the one we're living in now, looks at, no, let's tear it down. What's the point? They were wrong. Yeah. They didn't know. We're enlightened. Let's burn it down.
Yeah. Well, in that idea of building something and passing it on to next generations is like, oh, he didn't work for it. He got
Right.
handed his money or whatever, and it's like, okay, but how many rich bratty kids you see flush their parents' legacy down the toilet on drugs and women and whatever other bullcrap? They're not starting businesses. There's
Right.
plenty of rich kids. Look at Paris Hilton. You think she's doing anything with the legacy she's being handed? No, she's like totally screwing that up. And there's plenty of those just like her, you know.
Right. And that's here's the stuff, because that is the theme of Fight Club, but the presupposition of Fight Club is that our fathers abandoned us. And I think that's a key that we don't talk about either, is fatherlessness.
Yeah.
Like, masculinity involves responsibility, and fatherhood is a responsibility. And to abdicate that responsibility is probably the worst thing you can do to a society.
Yeah.
Because now you do have directionless men. Now you do have rudderless boats.
Yeah.
And all you're going to do is crash into each other.
And that's been one of the key factors in deteriorating neighborhoods and societies and communities, is a high propensity for fatherlessness.
Yes.
You know, and like my mom says, the government does that now. It's like, well, yeah. It's like, wait a second. You tell me I can leave my family, be rid of this crushing weight of responsibility, and they'll be okay, and they'll just have welfare or whatever you need. All right, cool, I'm out. You know, and then like one of my favorite lines of Fight Club was like, oh, you know, then he got remarried and started another family. It's like, dude, setting up a franchise. It's true. Like, all the men are just gonna, you know, appeal to their unhuman instincts and just screw anything with legs.
I mean,
Like,
but part of that, the dynamic of men and women being brought together to have a family, there's this idea of like, when you've slept with a woman, if she's pregnant, now you have a responsibility.
yeah,
And society holds you to that, but she holds you to that. But when the government swoops in and they tell you, well, you don't need him.
yeah.
We'll
This is
take care.
modern world. You don't have to take. We'll do that. Yeah.
You're a modern, strong woman. You're an independent woman, and you don't need no man. It's like, okay, maybe you don't, but your son does.
Yeah.
And if you're honest with yourself, you do, because you're only half of a whole. And there's nothing wrong with that. As human beings, we're half of a whole. Like, we're only whole when we're combined with our other half, right? Like, for that reason, a man leaves his father and mother and clings to his wife, and they become one flesh. Like, that's the order. That's what's supposed to happen.
And there's that in tuneness, and like two becoming one.
Right.
Again, bring it back to the source material. This section says, pay attention. He's talking about men with their wives. Men should live with their wives in an understanding way, right? This passage contains, because he's talking about, what was that from? For likewise, husbands, live with your wives in an understanding way, showing honor to the woman as the weaker vessel, since they are heirs with you of the grace of life, so that your prayers may not be hindered. 1 Peter 3:7. Women as the weaker vessel. I don't think so. Well, what that means, and Doug Wilson, I think, give the best explanation of this, is what that means is you're not talking about, you say weaker vessel, it means a weaker vessel is usually the more valuable thing.
Right.
Like the china.
Right.
You drop a paper plate on the ground, it's not gonna break. You drop the fine china on the ground, it's gonna break. But which is worth more? Which is more valuable? The fine china. So that's how that's the proper context we should understand as women as the weaker vessel, of like, they're not paper plates, flimsy, worthless. They're the fine china, you know, and that's to be guarded and protected and not smashed, you know. So because they're worth a lot. That's what he says too. Like, semen is cheap, eggs are expensive.
Well, there's so much of it.
Yeah, the whole thing. Yeah, it's like when you talk about fertility, like that's the price is the eggs, the freezing them and preserving them, and the viable one. Semen's all, you know. Sperm is cheap.
Find it on any corner.
Sperm is cheap. Sperm is cheap. Eggs are expensive.
Man.
But yeah, that's the thing. And I really like this part too in this section. He says, if I stop you at any time, will you be able to give me a rough sketch of your wife's schedule for the day? Can you identify at least one major issue that is on her mind and weighing down on her heart, making her afraid or frustrated or concerned? These are the things Peter has in mind. Most husbands have not the slightest clue what is going on in their wives' schedules, much less what challenges they're weighing on their hearts. That's so great. Like that's like you have to live with your wife in an understanding way, know her, understand her, not just live with her as a roommate or whatever. A lot of men go from their mom's house to their wife's house,
Yeah.
and they're just treating them the same way too.
Peter talking as a married man in that instance. Like Peter had a wife. He wasn't writing this, without knowledge. He was right. He knows what's up. Can you imagine? Oh man, I like to think about the discussion where she's like, "You're going out with him again? You're always with those 11 dudes. Like, what's going on? We got stuff going on here. My mother's sick." But I mean, that's true, and that's kind of what I was talking about with Rogan. Like, he built a clubhouse for himself to hang out with his friends.
Yeah, exactly. It's his escape, or it's his. But it is good. And a lot of things he talks about is really good, and I think is really lacking in a lot of modern men of ambition and competition and like just embrace these natural things that make men, these God-given sort of instincts that should be channeled in the right way. And I think for the most part he does, but it is that family element that is just completely lacking in all of his advice and all the people he brings on advice too. So and those people have family. He has a family. Rogan has a wife and kids that they have a happy, household. Presumably, from little I have heard him talk about it. And Jocko Willink, he's got a family. Like these people have families and children and stuff, but they just never talk about it. It's like, come on, like that's worthwhile. And all the guys listening to Joe Rogan are these video game pizza box bros who are putting off marriage and family as long as possible. I gotta fulfill my dream by just doing nothing but listening to podcasts and playing games.
One of the big switches for me was going from having a kid was going from friends that don't have kids to friends that do have kids. And like the change in the whole dynamic was different.
Yeah.
Everything changed at that point. And I remember the friends I had before, the friends who didn't have kids, didn't just not have kids. They detested the idea of ever having kids.
I never detested the idea of having kids. I never saw. I always knew like I would want kids, and I think I'd be a good father. But I never saw myself like having kids. I saw myself driving a car. I saw myself graduating high school, working a job, and even being married. But having kids, I was like, what the heck is that? That's so weird. Like, and I had no experience with kids at all. Like I don't know, like nieces and nephews and stuff that I took care of or babysat, or I never babysat, whatever. And that is something I think men should be more involved with. I think young men should be more involved with the children's ministry at their church. And I would say a lot of young, newly married or like single young men are involved with the children's ministry at my church. It's kind of weird. I know it's not like the dropping your kid off with some young single dude that feel comfortable. But I think that's good for a young man to do. And, talk about what do you do before you get married? That you practice that fatherhood of like, well, I got to be around kids. They're going to be annoying and loud and crazy and messy. I got to figure that out and like learn how to do, because I had none of that. I was like, these kids are so messy and annoying and crazy. And I just get frustrated. It's like some practice in that would have been, I think, helpful before having kids. But before I had my son, I probably could count on one hand the times I've ever held a baby.
Wow. That's crazy.
And you know what's crazy? It was awesome. The first time I met you, you were playing with a kid. It was at the Haney's house.
Oh, what? Yeah.
Names. You were like running around. Who was that? Noah?
It had to be Noah. Yeah, that's the only kid that was there.
I don't know, somebody's kid. But you were like, oh, fun kid. Like you're like sweating, running around outside with this little kid. And I was like, that guy's gonna be a good father one day.
Oh man, I'm hoping, because it's different when you got to keep him. That's when it gets weird.
Yeah. I'm start talking back.
Oh,
you're not the cool one. You're not the cool like uncle or friend or whatever. It's like
you're the lame authority.
You're the lame dad. Yeah.
But it is cool too. One of the things that changed, because I feel like part of, we talked we talked off camera about romanticism and the idea of like romanticism didn't have anything to do with love per se. Romanticism was more of an idea of like wonder in existence, right?
Yeah.
Like everything was romantic. Passions were in everything. And I think we kind of, especially in modern times, but as we get older, we kind of lose that. Like they aren't as impressive because you see them all the time. They're mundane. Like, yeah, the sun rises. It does that every day. What's cool about that? But like having a son and seeing him experience things for the first time, it kind of reminds you like this is crazy. Like this is a awesome thing that happens, even though to me it's like, well, it always happens. Why is that? Why
Yeah.
does it matter? And just seeing like normal things like the moon when he's like, oh, the moon is out. It's like, yeah, it's a big rock that floats around us and shines light. That is a crazy idea. And sometimes you see it and sometimes you don't. It's just
Yeah.
weird.
I know. I was telling him like because there's like a picture of the moon, and I was like, it's so bright. I was like, the moon reflects the sun,
Mm.
and he's like, yeah, and I was like, like a reflection, like a mirror, and he was like, yeah, we have a mirror in our bathroom. Like, yeah, you have a mirror in your bathroom. I was like, yeah. And like, I don't know if he's making that connection of like the moon reflects the sun, but it's like just to teach like a kid something is like really crazy because it's like you kind of see building blocks kind of snapping together. And it's like, is he getting it? I think he's getting it. Like,
And then like what I also noticed in him is like when they get in your way, like you're trying to do something and they come in and they grab it and they're like, you're in your way. It's like, oh, he's trying to help.
yeah.
Like he wants to do the thing, which is because like he has a compulsion to do something, which I think that's part of the problem with modern schooling. Like they have this compulsion to do something. Like I want to open the door. I want to get in the car. I want to start the car. I want to sit in the front seat. And it's like, no, sit down and be quiet. Like, okay, well, now all that potential is wasted and gone because now they're not going to want to do anything anymore. We've beaten that urge to do stuff out of them.
Yeah. Just comply.
Yeah.
Don't participate.
Obey.
Yeah. Well, I promise we're not planning this, but it's just going in line with like the next thing. Talk about fatherhood. Because if a father sincerely practices the 4 steps that I set out later in this chapter, read, pray, work, play, I believe he will be able to lead a very active work life without hindering his relationship with his children. But if the father frequently says, I'm sorry, I don't have time, the child will inevitably point his heart elsewhere. Someplace there is interest, attention, and excitement about his or her life. It is precisely a child's deep need for a sense of belonging that explains many of the troubles of young people, everything from drugs and gangs to premature romantic entanglements.
Wow.
So, and that's what I think he's saying. Like one of the best sentiments a father can say to his children is, "Give me your heart. Give me, son, give me your heart." Because if you have your son's heart, he will look at you as a valuable source of information and guidance and obedience and instruction and stuff. But if you don't have his heart, you're just a tyrant trying to ruin his fun, right? And that's one of the biggest things that Doug Wilson was talking about how like raising kids. It's really great. It's so amazing. I'll post it on the page. But he's talking about how you need to teach your kids to love the standard, not conform to the standard, right? He's talking about with their kids. So the idea is when you have kids, be as iron fist, hand, hammer, strength, tight, strict as possible from the beginning, and then slowly, as the cake bakes in and sets, let your hand off. And hopefully those things are baked in and conformed and formed in that they will actually be able to be okay, right? But you can't. So what he says, what usually happens is their sin as a baby and toddler can't ruin their life, right? They're throwing a tantrum in the restaurant or at Walmart. It's not gonna ruin their life. It's just annoying. It's like, okay, whatever. And so what parents do is they abide sin until one day their sin can ruin their life when they're drinking and driving or having sex with a girlfriend. It's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. And they're freaking out when the kid's 14 and doing all these things. And so they try to put on these restrictions. They go, oh, you're grounded. And it's like, it's too freaking late. That kid's already doing what he wants to do. And now his sin can ruin his life, right? And that's when parents freak out. You have to freak out and be crazy, strict parent when the sin can't ruin their life. When they're throwing the tantrum, when they're jumping on the couch, when they're being insane, or when they're sinning as little kids, that's when you have to have the iron grip. And then hopefully, teaching them to love the standard and what's right rather than just to conform. You put on those restrictions when they're 14, they'll just begrudgingly obey until they're 18 and can join the Navy. and lead you.
I was talking with somebody this week about, like woke culture and the idea of like systemic racism. And what's interesting to me about this whole thing is that they don't want to get rid of racism. They just want to curb the behavior of it, right? Like their whole thing is you can't be not racist if you're a white person. It's built in. There's no way around it.
Yeah.
What we need to do is make sure that that doesn't affect other people. So we don't want to end racism because we can't. We want well-behaved racists.
Well, it's the Marxist playbook. They don't want to rid America of the evil of racism. They want to tear down America and rebuild something new. It's unsavable. You can't, like I said, you can't save it. Systemic racism, the key word is system, not racism, right? It's not about bringing the racism out of the system. That's impossible. What you have to do is tear down the system and rebuild something new. It's that false, godless, materialistic view of regeneration. And it's like, that's the whole thing. They're trying to change what human beings are rather than dealing with what human beings are. Human beings are racist. You got to deal with that. You got to figure that out. No, we're just change human beings. It's like,
that's interesting.
You're crazy. That's insane.
With him, the thing was hitting. That was the first thing I had to whack him for, because he lost his temper because he was with my dad.
To teach him not to hit.
Yeah. Well, he was with my dad and he wanted him to put something on the TV and he wasn't understanding him because he couldn't talk. And so he got mad and just started whacking him.
Your dad?
Yeah, my son started whacking my dad because he was like, "Why aren't you getting what I'm saying?" And so I had to hit him and like try to get the point across. Like, look, you can be upset, but you cannot hit your grandpa like that. And now that he's a little bit older, it's like, okay, let's fight. And you can hit me. That's okay.
Yeah.
And if you like whack my glasses off, it's like, okay, you can't do that.
Yeah.
Like, it's weird to set these boundaries. Like, there's nothing wrong with hitting people. You just have to know who and why and when. And try to like mold that. So hopefully at some point it sticks in. Like, oh, okay, don't hit mommy. Don't break dad's glasses. But it's okay to play and fight.
That's what Doug Wilson talks about in Future Man. He's talking about kids playing with swords and guns, plastic swords and plastic guns. The modern view of that is no. Get those out. Get the fake guns. Don't teach them how to do it. You say no. Teach them how to use swords and guns when they're plastic, because then they won't. If they get their hands on the real thing, they'll know what to do. He's talking about like kids playing war and boys like shooting each other and stuff. It's like, don't end that. Don't stop that and take the guns away. Teach them. You don't shoot your mom. You shoot your brother who has the gun. Yeah, y'all shoot each other, but you can't shoot someone who doesn't have a gun. And they'll understand that in the rules of war, and they'll be like, "Oh, okay." And then it's like, "Okay, don't shoot my sister who's playing with her Barbies. Don't shoot my mom who's cooking. Don't shoot my brother who's got the gun." You create these kind of paths and forms of like how they're supposed to use guns. And you talk about the same way with like drinking and smoking. Right? Like, don't just restrict things. Teach them how to drink. Teach them. He's like, you have a responsibility to teach your kids how to drink and smoke. Right. And like how that's, there's time and place and how to responsibly do those things.
I mean, and that's what sports does too. Like the idea of sport rules in sports. It's like, yes, the goal is to win, but you have to win according to the rules.
Yeah. It's like, and you can hit that guy.
Right.
But this way.
Right. Hit him the correct way, not the wrong way.
Exactly. And it's like, instead of like, don't hit, it's like, well, if they get a situation where they have to hit somebody, they're going to do it wrong. They're going to do terrible and then kill somebody or something. It's like, no, teach your kids how to fight. Don't teach them not to fight. Teach them how to fight. But that's the problem. A lot of people today don't understand that there is a way to fight. When someone's pinching your sister, fight. When someone's annoying you, don't fight them. That's not, but someone's never taught anything about fighting is going to not know anything what to do.
And I mean, there is a concept to that, even in like combat sports, which I think combat sports is important too for masculinity. Yeah. I know we get into like the UFC bro who just like pounds Coors Light and wears tap out shirts, but like there's an
they don't fight. Anybody who fights doesn't do that. That's anybody who like under the discipline of martial arts doesn't have that view of it.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is, I never did Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but I knew some guys who did. And they were like super friendly guys, which is always interesting. Like the idea of like a gentle warrior, like, oh yeah, he's fully capable of killing you, but he's confident in that. He doesn't need to flex on it.
Yeah.
Like he's welcoming and polite and about that. But like in combat sports, there's that idea too of like, there's certain fighters that we don't like, not because they're not skilled, but because they're not honorable.
Mm-hmm.
Like, as much as popular as he is, I hate Conor McGregor with everything in me.
Really?
He's so cocky in the worst way.
I thought you'd like him.
Oh, I hate him. I hate
he's like the Irish Kanye.
But you know what the problem is? Kanye can have bad PR, but it took forever for somebody to beat McGregor. That was the problem. Like, I wanted somebody to beat him to like work because he's the heel. He's the bad guy. Like, he's the cop. And when Nate Diaz beat him, that was the coolest thing I ever saw.
Just a fluke.
No, that was he. He gave up his back. That was a rookie. That was Conor's got no ground game. That's why he couldn't have Khabib either.
Yeah,
but that's
all he has is a big left arm.
The combat sports is that idea of like, yes, we're gonna punch each other in the face, but we're gonna agree to do it this way, and we're gonna be respectful about it. Mm-hmm. And afterwards, there's not gonna be ill will about it.
Yeah,
like, this is the thing we're agreeing to do, and afterwards, it's over.
Well, and there's a humbling factor too.
Yes,
like, and that's what some of Joe Rogan talks a lot about too, and martial artists talk about too. Like, you might be a black belt, and some blue belt gets a good kick and knocks you out.
Right.
Like, what do you do with that? Or like, if you've been kicked in the head and like knocked out or like tapped out, there's that you're getting these little safe doses of humility, right? Where it's not going to ruin your life. It's not going to freaking destroy you. But it's like you were humbled, but that's okay, and you learned and you've grown, right? And we don't have a lot of that today. I think a lot of that's discouraged, and that's terrible for humanity.
One of my junior high principal was talking about how when he was in high school, if they had a fight, it was like, hold on. We're not going to do that like this. And they would take him into the gym and throw boxing gloves on him. And it was like, fight like this. This is how you're going to fight. We're going to control it. And it's going to be safe. Go ahead and work it out, but not with your fists on the street.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's kind of an interesting idea that let's resolve the problem, but let's do it in a safe way. Let's control this and not just be like, somebody has sour grapes because they get punched in the street and they come back with a knife and then the other guy comes back with a gun. Like,
exactly.
Let's set this up and this is it. This is the thing. This is done.
That's how you get drive-bys. It's never released. Yeah. It's never like, look, we settled this and it was it. The score was the score. And I got knocked out, but it was a fair fight and I stood up. At least I did it. It's like this pent up, like they ended the fight. No, man, I'm just pissed off. I'm going to go tell my brother we're going to go drive by his house.
Right, yes.
And it's like, what are you talking about? Like, that's a
like chaos. A Karate Kid, LaRusso had to enter the tournament at the end when he wins. Johnny's like, you're all right, LaRusso.
He broke the rules. He kicked to the face.
Well, he also had a magical Japanese man, and nobody said anything about that. So, what are you gonna do? He healed him with He used the Force. You can't do that. That's against any rule.
Oh man! All right, I guess we should wrap up.
Yeah, let's
run along. We don't run along again. We need Abby. That's why we need Abby, because she's gonna be like, okay, yeah, we're gonna go all night.
We need to direct our masculinity.
Yeah. Yeah. So any final words? Jesus is the ultimate man.
Right.
The biblical masculine mandate is to work and keep, responsibility, sacrifice. Work is good. We have a responsibility to work, and we should find purpose in that and work for ultimately an audience of one. There's a story in Masculine Mandate about this pianist or this composer not going out for an encore because one man wasn't standing. And they said, well, what are you talking about? There's thousands of people want you to go out for an encore. And he's like, see that man that stands? Unless he stands, I'm not going to go back out for an encore. And that man was his trainer. That man was his instructor. And it's like, that's the only opinion he cared about. And that should be our reflection as men of like, look, the world's saying all these different stuff, but we work and keep and have responsibility to sacrifice for an audience of one. Right. And that's what the Bible says in God's word, in Christ's example. And that's our audience of one. And until he asks for an encore, we're not going back out. We're not, that's whose opinion matters. Right. And that's kind of where we should all direct our instruction and all that. But
I like that.
Masculine Mandate, Future Men. There's some other books that are pretty good, but those are the best ones as far as a biblical manhood view.
And if you're like me and you don't read, you want to watch something, two talks by Nate Wilson, Troublemakers, and The World is R-Rated. Those are both good. And then Do Not Give Your Strength to Women by Toby Sumter is also a good one. Anything out of Cannon Press or Moscow, Idaho is going to be good. So just go with it. Yeah. So on that, we'll see you guys next week with Abby again. So
yeah.
Peace.
See y'all.